Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of Xaereth Remembers. And we're going to be covering my first Grand Arena loss here. I have no idea if I'm going to keep this series up or what. This video is actually meant to atone for my last Grand Arena championship match, which I did not show, which was a loss. And, I lost all my video from that, and it's really frustrating. And I'm not trying to make excuses. I am going to showcase a few of those things on my next video, but I did want to kind of atone for that by highlighting my first fail in Grand Arena way back like about a year ago. So kick back and watch my old epic editing skills. No audio whatsoever in my initial videos, just a bunch of text. So strap in, it's going to be interesting. Alright, so we find ourselves in episode 5.3. That means that this is the fifth iteration of the single Grand Arena tournaments that we used to have. We didn't have championships. It's not GAC, it's just GA. And I'm at 14-0, feeling pretty good about myself. And I'm facing a dude named Diegus Prime. No idea if this person is actually still playing or anything. You can see a really interesting version of the DSR bot. I just kind of did an overlay here. These were simpler days when we used to have Xaereth as the best character. You can see that my text is just over his face, but it's we're only at gear 12 at that point. No gear 13, nothing like that. And this actually has ships in it as well. So this is a pretty familiar layout if you guys have been playing Grand Arena Championships recently. And my opponent put their Xaereth on defense, which is a jerk move. And then they put their Basilisk squad on defense as well. And people have been doing that lately as well. I've been noticing that a lot in the current Grand Arena Championships. So we're trying to get through the first zone, the easier zone to crack. And I've never liked this format where you have to only kill 2 teams, and then after that you have full knowledge of all the squads you have to counter. But that's the way it was back then. It hasn't changed, and I guess we can just move on. Bastila lead is still a really great lead. Jedi Anakin has not been remade yet, but he was one of the Jedi with some of the most offense back then, and so he was still viable in a second Jedi squad. Mace Windu has never been viable. I don't know what my opponent was doing, except he did have gear 12 on him, probably for ships or something. Bounty hunters have always been great against Bastila lead. It's funny, I just used my alt account in the current Grand Arena Championships. I used this exact team composition to crack a Bastila squad on defense. And, you can see that Bastila has a ton of different, buffs, and you can add a bunch of debuffs to the squad as well if you can get through all of the crazy bonus tenacity. But then Boba can just do his big execute move and, just demolish people because of all of the extra buffs. Execute dispels all of those, but it also just obliterates the character. So that principle still holds true. Got rid of Jedi Anakin, and back then he was really, all he did was just DPS. That was his whole thing. He was okay. He was just pretty one-dimensional, and I mean he's still a little bit one-dimensional, but he's a lot more interesting. Everyone has him at Relic 7 and everything now, but it was kind of rare to find one at Gear 12. So I think I had one at Gear 12, or at least Gear 11 back then. But we're just trying to clear, and even back then my whole philosophy was trying to clear as efficiently as possible. I still hadn't come up with all of the teams that I needed to yet. Everyone was still developing their strategies. It was only about a month into Grand Arena anyways, so even as excited as I was to play Grand Arena, I wasn't necessarily I obviously did well enough to be 14-0, but I didn't have everything figured out by any stretch. One thing I will point out is that bounty hunters, even though a lot of people just use them on defense these days, including myself, they were a staple for me on offense because look at those 660 banners against a pretty strong, it was at least fully geared Jedi team. 60 banners is great, a year ago or right now. You want to be efficient, and with Bosk Bounty Hunters, you could just kill. You could always find a team to kill with them. And these days, it's a little more sketchy. It's hard to find a team like that. Anyways, this was back in the day before clones had been reworked. Rex lead was great, and so I had B2. He hadn't been reworked yet. Wampa is good against this team. That was always my thing. Zeta Maul was actually a pretty big deal back then. He has diminished in importance, though I actually just faced one of those as well in the last Grand Arena match that I had on my main account. So, it's kind of fun to find the parallels. B2 has always been really fun to dispel things, and back then it was commonly thought that if you had B2 worked on, it was great. You put an accuracy arrow on him, actually. One of the few times in the game's history that I've ever seen an accuracy arrow, commonly prescribed, and that was just because Maul has all of this crazy evasion. You're always missing your shots against them, and really the only use for B1, or rather B2 at that time, was to counter this Maul team. And this Dooku hasn't been reworked yet. I do have Probe Droid here, and he's ready to explode, but he didn't actually kill Sith Trooper there. So that was kind of disappointing, apparently. I'm guessing that also costs at least 3 banners. So, not necessarily the best choice, perhaps. I should probably have looked at his total health and protection pool. But another reason you want to take Wampa in this match, Rex is great because he provides the tenacity up, and Wampa is great because he never misses on his basic. So, he also causes daze, so there's no turn meter shenanigans, and that the combination of Rex and Wampa, it was really potent back then. That was my go-to. I remember I used that team against even some Jedi Training Rey teams. But as you can see, it's not the best in banners, and we're trying to regenerate some of these things, but after killing myself with Probe Droid, like 53 banners, you can see on my note on the top, it's pretty sloppy. Though honestly, I don't know what I was expecting. I mean, they had AoEs available, they had a good tank, it was a good team. If I planned on destroying Probe Droid right away, then of course I was going to miss 3 banners regardless. And then if they did an AoE on me, there's no way to regenerate that. Maybe you can avoid some of that damage with Wampa if you do his AoE first. But otherwise, you're going to be down, almost exactly 7. So, that's just par for the course. But apparently I was surprised back then, and GAC, I'd only been going for basically 1 season's worth. So this is actually the most important match right here. I had put my Jedi Revan on defense, and so had my opponent, and my only counter to that was my Traya squad. And this was one of the few times that I actually used Traya in Grand Arena at any point to counter Jedi Revan. So this is actually a little bit of a tragedy. I'll let you guys see what the results are for yourself. But just the fact that I am putting myself out there. I've been working on this off-meta counter. Traya is still the second strongest squad in the entire game, but, she definitely plays second fiddle to Jedi Revan, and, the way you counter this, you always want to fracture Jedi Revan. That hasn't changed. Back then, Jedi Revan had Grandmaster, or rather General Kenobi on the team because General Kenobi didn't have Padme to go with. And so you want to put fracture on the Jedi Revan, and then, I finally got isolate. And, this has always been an issue for me, at least, is trying to get isolate, because Jedi Revan, if he gets too many turns, if he's fast enough, he'll just keep marking Traya until she's dead. And mark is also good because it increases cooldowns. So, she may never get Isolate. Once you do get Isolate and you can throw it on Grandmaster Yoda, then you're gonna be have a decent shot at winning this. We had Bastila back then, or Badstila, I should say, and she was pretty good. I think that was really the only reason I was able to compete using this squad against Jedi Revan. I never really got it to a really high level. Like, I was just starting to try off meta counters, and this was my first attempt, and I thought that this was pretty cool. Like, I felt like I could probably win this thing, actually. Traya isn't even down all of her protection, and so, we're doing pretty well. I was able to annihilate GK, which wasn't my preference, apparently. And so I killed Grandmaster Yoda, and, he was under Isolate, so I figured he wasn't going to be able to be revived. And I think that that's a mistake. I guess we'll see here in a minute. I haven't watched this whole video in advance, so a lot of this stuff is going to be surprising and fun for me as well. I think a lot of people mix up the Traya from the raid with the Traya that we have. They say that if you put Isolate on a character, then if you kill them, then it prevents revives in the future, and that's definitely true in the raid. But I think that on the characters that we currently have, that's not true. Though, Jolie did. I guess he just used his assist call, so we can't tell yet. So throw Isolate up on Jolie. I don't know if that prevents the revive or not, but one way or another, we're isolating him. So, I'm starting to run down on time, and, luckily I was able to get the Annihilate off. Apparently I chose Jedi Revan instead of Jolie, which I'm not really sure why, but that's the choice I made. And I wonder if I would have actually won this match if they had Bastila on the squad. Bastila had her own squad, if you remember. So maybe I would have won, maybe not. Apparently I'm just killing Hermit Yoda for fun. Jolie is waiting to revive here. I don't know why he hasn't revived Grandmaster Yoda yet and made my life hell, but he hasn't, and so I guess I'm happy enough. And he finally succumbed. I got 58 banners, which is great against that squad. We're using Traya. It's still great, to be honest. And, I was pretty proud of myself. Like, that's great banners. That's, I used an off-meta team to be able to beat them. And, I had my best team, which had a lot of good mods on it, on defense, and my opponent didn't have their Jedi Revan available to counter them, so I felt pretty confident moving into this. Now this is a match that I haven't played for a really long time. It's First Order versus Bounty Hunters, and Bounty Hunters are great against everyone but First Order. And here, I started it off a little bit wrong. You should give turn meter immediately to original Kylo, and he does his AoE, and it spreads turn meter to everyone. So clearly I've gotten a little bit better at this game since then. But that back then this was such a hard counter. Like, people would put Bosk on defense, and I'd get 60 banners every single time using First Order, because if you get your initial stun off on Bosk, it's a 2-turn stun. I mean, it's still 2 turns. This squad hasn't changed for a year, so you get stun on him, and you have no one that can actually dispel that at all. So that this is about as hard of a counter as you can get, as long as you can get stun on him before he actually goes. And that's still true today. It's just people are putting crazy fast Bosks in now, and they're putting Jango lead, which makes them even faster, and First Order have a hard time competing with that. But back then, like I said, this is about as hard of a counter as you can get. And I just remember feeling frustrated because no one ever believed me that I was able to do this. Like, even now, today, people say, like, oh, whatever, First Order are a bad team. Like, they're excited for the new changes and the new characters that are coming out. But at the same time, they still don't believe that First Order can actually accomplish a lot. And they've been a mainstay for me from day one. This Bosk team was well geared, and I have no idea if they were fast or not, but overall, like, my First Order team just completely destroyed it. Not even close. So, that's what you get for messing with the First Order, I guess. And 60 banners is pretty cool. I still get 60 banners with my First Order pretty consistently. And that's just a good squad. And now we have this First Order team here on on defense. Apparently I decided to try to clear 2 other teams first. I really don't know why. I wasn't sure why then. It doesn't make that much sense to me. But decided to use troopers, which honestly I went with troopers for a long time. I used them a lot, and then at some point I kind of phased them out of my attack plan, and then eventually they made a comeback. But they've always been great against Ewoks, and as long as you have a faster start than Paplu is the threat to be able to be faster than you. As long as that happens, then you're good to go. So banners wise, troopers have always been great. 60 banners, wonderful. And now we have Nightsisters and a First Order team to take out, and I assume that I have good counters to that. Now the First Order, or rather the Nightsisters team, is actually pretty tricky because it has Nest in it, and I still have struggles against that, to be honest. Like, it's a pretty good team because you can't use a lot of the teams that you normally would. Like, I would use Bounty Hunters to counter this back then, but trying to kill Nest is pretty dicey at times with Bounty Hunters. And apparently, I'm just trying to get a squad together that can beat these Nightsisters. I didn't want to take C-3PO, apparently, just looking at all my notes. So I have 4 guys that can stun, and, in fact, Commander Luke can also stun. So I was wrong. All 5 of them can stun, and we're trying to take on this Nightsisters team with Nest. I've heard people call it Nest Sisters. It's kind of annoying to me, so I won't call it that again, I promise. Unless there are actually times that I would potentially do that. You see, I made a mistake there with Commander Luke. I should have done the ability block, or rather the buff block on Zombie right away, so that she can't get buffs. But apparently I didn't think of that. So, apparently I'm just trying to stun lock the whole team, which is kind of fun, I guess. Commander Luke back then was pretty dicey against sisters, and honestly I think it's still a little bit dicey. I ran sisters against a pretty high relic CLS team the other day with my low relic Nightsisters, but it can get pretty sketchy one way or another. So I think I was pretty reluctant to do this. I didn't want to time Nest out with C-3PO, and I think that's a valid thing to be thinking about. It's a valid consideration. Not sure why I didn't try to stun Nest there, except maybe she had really high tenacity or something like that. But one way or another, she has tenacity down now, so I can stun her, and now we can kill Zombie for, no loss, because Zombie doesn't have any other characters to be around. She dies once you kill all the Nightsisters, so now hopefully we can just murder Nest and move along. And one thing I want to point out is this is still the approved way to kill Nest. You get tenacity down on her, you stun her, eventually she's going to take a turn, as long as you're not reducing too much of her turn meter. And once she does take a turn, she won't actually do anything because she's stunned. She'll just come out of stun, unless it's a 2-turn stun or something like that. But once that happens, then she doesn't do anything, she can't regenerate her health, and you can hit her. So, I'm saying I could have used C-3PO there. I actually, my note there is an interesting one. I think that maybe that's false. 3PO may have prevented me from actually giving Nest a turn. So, I don't know. I wouldn't have risked it. Today I had to make a decision in my own Grand Arena match about Commander Luke and potentially taking out a team with Nest, and I won't tell you what I decided, but that was absolutely a consideration, was should I take 3PO with me in that match or not. And so one thing that's I kind of gummed myself up here. I took R2 with that Commander Luke team, which is great. R2 does really good, against everything as long as he's with Commander Luke. Really wonderful natural fit. But that means that my Jedi Training Rey team is a little bit confused. I have 3PO there, but 3PO is just not as good as R2D2 on this squad, frankly. Like, he is good, he's fine, and you can win matches. You're doing way more damage because, he's creating extra exposes and everything, but he's just a little he doesn't do as many good things. Like, the thing you really want on a Jedi Training Rey team is the ability to hide everyone. All of your squishy characters, you want to put stealth onto BB-8 and have him take the hits, because he'll evade one of them, and then the next one they'll just counter, and or rather he'll get hit and then he'll counter and call someone else to assist. So that's a pretty good deal, I guess. And without that protection, like, it's a pseudo taunt, to be honest. Like, that's really what BB-8 is. Like, he's a tank and on the team, and he fits the role really well, in fact. However, without that stealth, no one's targeting him, no one's hitting him, and so I lost my two really squishy characters in the back. Jedi Training, or rather Scavenger Rey, was gear 11, and she is still gear 11 to this day, which, she needs to be Relic 7 eventually, so that'll be interesting. But, this has been a hard counter for a long time, using Jedi Training Rey against Kylo here, and, that's probably not going to change, frankly. So you can see it, he's still hard to kill even back then, because the exposes don't actually do damage to him, and they actually kind of heal him. So as long as you use your special from Rey, it prevents healing and you can't dispel it, and eventually he just goes away. But 54 banners is a pretty sloppy result. I think that's probably the lowest result I've ever gotten with Jedi Training Rey against First Order. Still, this hasn't been that bad of a clear, especially for back then, when we're still trying to get all of our counters up and running. And now, fleets are, back then they were, I don't know, I was going to say interesting. They're kind of not, though, frankly. But I do have the Millennium Falcon that's been around forever, I guess, and there's Geonosians and everything. I'm trying to decide what to do here. Should I take all of the ships or not? And apparently I decided, yes, that's needed. Geonosians back then were to be feared. I still see them in territory wars sometimes, at least in the sloppier ones against the sloppier guilds. But they don't ever really do anything, even with Relic 7 Geos. I'm not very impressed with them. Back then, they were a little bit more feared, though. And Millennium Falcon has been my fleet forever. Honestly, I don't know. Apparently, I feared them because I should have taken more characters, or rather less characters, less ships, and I just didn't. Apparently, I think, really, one thing that's interesting about my own fleet shard is it never hit the Geonosian, meta. Like, no one ever took that. It was always other ships, basically just Millennium Falcon or bust. My ship shard has never been super dynamic anyways. No offense to any of the guys on there. It's just not many people participating, really. So, a lot of these different metas I never really experienced all the way, and I don't really regret that, to be honest. But this is a pretty interesting match. Like, I'm clearly destroying them, and at this point I'm sure that I was regretting that I didn't just undersize this, but 66 banners is cool. I don't even know if you can get more. I don't know if you can get more than 66 back then. So, really, this was a pretty good full clear. Like, I was pretty efficient, a couple missteps, but overall, I did pretty well, I think. you know, that my opponent did kill my Nightsisters, which my Nightsisters were something that I had been working on quite a bit, so that's disappointing. And, you know, apparently I didn't do a video of the final standings or anything, so I did screenshots, which, you know, the question was, could I remain undefeated, and my opponent beat me by 1 point. So, props to them. That's unfortunate, honestly, just because I would have liked to have won, obviously, but I used like this new cool counter with Traya, and you know, beat their Revan. My Revan was fully relicked, yeah, fully geared, you know, really good, and I still lost. So unfortunate, honestly. It's one of the few losses that I've received that I feel like it kind of wasn't my fault. Like someone just played better, and I don't mean to imply that I didn't deserve to lose here. Like I'm sure that there was strategy issues, and my opponent played better than I did, regardless. But you know, it's just kind of a funny thing. Like I think this is one of the losses that I've had that I felt like I played pretty well given the circumstances and still lost. So, you know, most of my other losses you can really just pin on like, oh yeah, I failed in a big way, you know, on this specific counter. For the most part, the things I did made sense. So, at least to me. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna let you go. So thank you so much for watching, and remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.